Yo, so today I'm gonna be ranking all the dragons in the Soulsborne games. Yes, all dragons, even the ones in Elden Ring, but excluding Bloodborne, as I'm pretty sure there aren't any dragons in that game. So again, I'll be ranking all dragons from worst to best, except for anything that isn't a traditional dragon, so no magma worms, dragonkin soldiers, or ancient dragon men are gonna be on this list. You have to straight up look like a dragon and act like one. For example, wyverns and drakes aren't technically dragons, but hey, they look close enough so I included them. But before I get into the ranking, be sure to like and subscribe only if you want to. Also remember, this is just my opinion. This is not a definitive ranking or anything. I'm just a guy ranking stuff for fun. But other than that, let's get right into the video. The ancient wyvern seemed like it would be a really cool boss at first, as its entrance is pretty cool. Then you start attacking it only to realize that you're barely doing any damage, so you look around the arena to see if you need another weapon to kill it similar to Yorm, but only to find out that there's no fog wall on the other side behind the wyvern. So you progress through the short level realizing that the boss's health bar isn't disappearing, which gives you an idea that you still need to fight this thing. Now you might be saying to yourself, oh, I can't wait to get this special weapon because that's gotta be the way to kill it, until you progress further to the point where you're standing over the wyvern's head and then you realize, oh, the game wants you to plunge attack. So you do so, only to realize again that by doing this the boss's entire health bar is wiped out. Like, what? The build-up was cool, but it's just kind of disappointing that we one-shotted it. Sure, you have the option to fight it head-on, but that's more tedious than fun. Either way, I'm not gonna shit on it too much because it's one of the funniest moments in the game, still doesn't make it a good dragon fight. This fight is terrible in my opinion. It's very similar to the Guardian Dragon as it only has one special attack. The special attack involves the ancient dragon flying into the air and breathing fire, which is not only boring but frustrating as well, because its fire breath attack has way more reach compared to that of the Guardian Dragon. I swear, evading this attack feels so inconsistent. At many points during the fight I was able to avoid getting hit by it, but then I got hit by it once and then immediately again, which caused me to die the first time during this fight. Which is weird because I ran immediately after seeing him charge it up. This move is absolutely bullshit, and the fact that the ancient dragon has so much health doesn't make this any better. Plus the fight itself is extremely boring and repetitive. Apart from the nice scenery and lore, this encounter is not great in my opinion. The Guardian Dragon is one of the more boring dragon fights as it's really lackluster. This was my face before the boss fight, and this was it during and after the fight. It's really mid. Literally the dragon only has one move and it's so easy to dodge. When it flies up into the air, all you have to do is run behind it and you're all set. Wait for it to land, hit its leg, rinse and repeat. That's literally the whole fight. Again, it's really boring and underwhelming. However, I don't think that the fight is bad at all since unlike the ancient dragon, it doesn't overstay its welcome and it does its job well as a filler boss. Moving on to Sensiax. Not gonna lie, I hate this fight. It's not good in my opinion. And I'm not gonna call it the worst as there are definitely worse dragon fights out there. It's just that this boss is, look, I don't know how to explain it. The dragon just doesn't give you any time to attack it. It's literally just an AoE fest. Every attack in its arsenal is followed by an aftershock, which isn't super hard to dodge, but it definitely drags on the fight a lot and makes it an endurance test. Meaning you finally get the hang of its attack patterns and here you are dodging all of its attacks, even the follow-ups, only to look at its health bar and realize that it's been 3 minutes and you barely scratched past 80%. That's the main issue with this fight, followed with the camera and the fact that this thing does not stay still at all. It sucks and it's literally my least favorite dragon fight in Elden Ring, and the fact that the design is a reskin doesn't make it any better. Flying Dragon Grail. Grail is similar to Agil as it's just a basic bitch dragon, except this time you fight it on a bridge. Yay, nothing more fun than fighting a big ass dragon in a somewhat cramped space. Now to be fair though, Grail was programmed to fight within this space, so it's not like he's just flying all over the place attacking you at random points. However, it still doesn't make the fight all that fun. I mean, we're literally just fighting a more constrained version of Agil. It's not a bad boss, just really lackluster due to the fact that it's a reskin with a health and damage buff, placed in a small space. Gaping Dragon. The Gaping Dragon is an okay fight. It doesn't have any cool spectacular moves and the arena isn't this grand stage, but there is a certain charm about it that I like. First of all, let's talk about its design. It looks freaking cool, and it looks like something straight out of a horror movie, and the arena is pretty cool too. Sure, it's just a sewer, but that's what makes me like the fight even more. The fact that you're fighting this abomination in the bottom of the sewers just feels so cool without being grand or, whatever, I don't know. While the Gaping Dragon lacks in moveset compared to the other dragons I've mentioned so far, it's definitely the better fight. Now let's move on to Sin the Slumbering Dragon. Many people regard Sin as the best dragon fight in Dark Souls 2, which is true for that game, but compared to the rest, the battle feels a bit off, almost clunky in a way that's hard to describe. There's just this stiffness to his animation that detracts from the overall fluidity of the encounter. The fight just doesn't have that smooth, dynamic flow you'd hope for when you're fighting such a big ass dragon. That's not to say that the fight is terrible. Sin does have moments where he shines, especially when he flies up to the air and shoots his poisonous breath. As far as dragon battles go, there are some good elements here. He has that classic dragon behavior of flying around using fire and presenting a solid challenge. It's just that he's a bit stiff. But when I think of memorable dragon fights across the series, he doesn't stand out as the best. His fight is serviceable but lacks the excitement of the other encounters. Ultimately, while Sin isn't bad by any means, I don't believe he lives up to the praise some people give him as, one of the top dragon fights in the entire Soul series. Burus is definitely one of the more memorable overall dragon fights in Elden Ring, mostly because of how it looks, but I honestly hate fighting it at times. The main reason is its huge health pool, which makes the fight drag on longer than it should. On top of that, its frost AoE attack is super frustrating as you have to keep running away from it, and if you get caught, you can easily get stun locked, which is really annoying. The fight ends up feeling more like a chore than a fun challenge, but there are times where I found it fun, mostly when you have like a high damaging large weapon. While Burus does stand out because of its size and appearance, the actual gameplay experience isn't enjoyable for me. Having to evade the frost AoE over and over just makes it repetitive, and the sheer amount of damage you have to deal to bring it down feels like overkill. Because of this, I always skip Burus on subsequent playthroughs. It's just not a dragon fight I look forward to or enjoy enough to bother with again. Even though its visuals are the reasons why I ranked it higher than the others, the frustration it causes sometimes outweighs any fun, so it's an easy one to pass up in later runs. Decaying Exikes. I'm probably saying that wrong, so I'll just call him Ezekiel. This is another dragon I'm not a fan of fighting. Like Burus, Ezekiel has some really powerful AoE attacks that makes the battle more frustrating than fun. The Scarlet Rot aesthetic looks really cool on a dragon, but actually fighting one with the ability is a whole different story. The main issue with him is his Scarlet Rot AoE attack. Not only does it deal a ton of damage, but it also can stun lock you, which makes the fight even worse. On top of that, the rot gas spreads really far, so it's hard to avoid. It feels like you spend most of the fight running away from the gas cloud rather than actually battling the dragon. If it weren't for the Scarlet Rot AoE being so annoying to deal with, I would have placed him higher on the list, but as it stands, the combination of high damaging and frustrating mechanics makes this fight one I prefer to avoid. Not saying he's hard or there's no fun in fighting him, as there is, but he can be a bit annoying at times. Here we have Agil, probably the most basic dragon in Elden Ring. And I don't mean that in a bad way. In fact, I think Agil is actually a solid dragon fight. He flies around a lot, but still gives you plenty of chances to land hits, which makes the fight feel balanced. He has some various fire breath attacks, and fighting him in the open field also adds to the natural flow of the battle, making it feel like a classic dragon encounter. Agil's entrance is pretty cool too, with him swooping in to start the fight. When it comes down to his moveset, it's nothing spectacular, but it gets the job done. He has a mix of aerial and ground attacks like his stomps, various fire breath attacks, and sweeping tail strikes. It's all pretty straightforward, but it works. The fight doesn't have any wild mechanics or overwhelming attacks, but as a dragon boss, Agil performs his role really well. Overall, he's not the most flashy or complex, but sometimes that simplicity is what makes the fight more enjoyable. Agil is a solid dragon encounter, and while it's not the most exciting, it feels just right for what it is. Glenstone Dragon in the Lakes. Basically a guild just with a blue font and also one extra attack consisting of him shooting a giant soul crystal. That's it. Glenstone Dragon the Dulla. Same as the previous Glenstone Dragon, except it has one extra move where it uses a soul sword to do a swoop attack. It only ranks higher than the previous two because, Dulla is a bit flashier and drops more runes, so it feels more rewarding to fight it. Ghost Flame Dragons. These fights are basically a reskin of the other overworld dragon battles, except they shoot Ghost Flame and can cause a huge, Ghost Flame explosion. They make a cool fight, I guess. I really like the whole undead theme and Ghost Flame aesthetic going on, but overall they're just kind of average. They don't stand out much from the other dragon fights aside from the Ghost Flame attacks. What I've realized though is that for some reason there isn't a frenzied flame dragon in the game. They should have included something like that in the DLC. But that aside, while the ghost flame dragons are visually interesting, they don't offer much that we've, haven't already seen. The concept is cool, but the fight itself is pretty middle of the road. It's not bad, but it's not particularly, exciting either. Calamite is an impressive dragon fight, especially considering he's from Dark Souls 1, a slower paced game. His moves are cool, with the eye gravity slam being a standout attack that really adds to the challenge. One thing I noticed during the fight is how important it is to stay agile. Despite his massive size, Calamite moves around a lot, and trying to fight him while being slow and heavy just won't work. He's surprisingly quick, so keeping up with him is essential. Overall, Calamite is an incredible boss fight, and I've mentioned this in a previous video, but again, I'd easily rank him in my top 10 Dark Souls 1 bosses. He's not the hardest, but he's definitely one of the best designed and most memorable fights in the game. This is basically the first phase of the Nameless King fight, where he rides in on his Storm Drake. Before making this video, I never thought this phase was bad. Sure, it's definitely weaker than the second phase, but it wasn't anything terrible. After fighting the Storm Drake again, I have to say, my opinions haven't changed, except for one thing: the camera. The camera is genuinely the worst part of this fight. You have to watch out for the Drake's attacks like its fire breath, while also keeping an eye on the Nameless King's moves, and switching the camera between the two drives me crazy. That said, I really like that there's a dragon fight with an actual dragon rider. I wish more dragon fights in the future featured a rider, because it makes the encounter feel more cinematic. The arena is also amazing, as you're literally walking on clouds in a stormy place, which makes it feel like you're battling a sky deity. The attacks in this phase include the Storm Drake's fire breath and various attacks from the Nameless King, whether they are regular strikes or lightning based. Another reason why I enjoy this fight is that it doesn't overstay its welcome. Let's be honest, the Storm Drake's health pool is quite low. You could sneeze on it and it would probably take damage from that. Overall, the combination of the Dragon Rider concept and the unique setting makes this phase memorable, even if the camera work can be frustrating at times. It's a fun fight that keeps you on your toes without dragging on for too long. Lanx is a fantastic overworld dragon fight, and it's really similar to Puda Sax, except she doesn't have the same amount of aura he has. Despite that, Lanx has a great moveset, with the lightning blade slash being a standout attack. One big positive about the fight compared to Puda Sax is that it doesn't have the annoying lightning tracking attack, which can be really frustrating. Overall, I think the fight is pretty enjoyable. Lanx has some impressive attacks that keeps you on your toes. The lightning effects looks really cool and adds to the excitement of the fight. Even though she shares some similarities with Puda Sax, she manages to feel fresh and engaging in her own way. Now let's move on to Bale the Dread. In one of my latest videos, I talked about how I didn't really enjoy fighting Bale. While I recognize that the fight looked impressive, it felt more about him showing off his cool moves than being a fun experience. To me, it seemed like Bale was just there to, impress me with his visuals while giving you very few chances to attack. A lot of y'all disagreed with me and said I was wrong and said that I should, stop ranking. After some thought, I decided that y'all might have a point, so I decided to give Bale another try. For this video, I fought him twice. Once with the Black Steel Great Hammer and the other with the Dragon Katana. Going into my first attempt, I knew I was going to struggle, as it had been a while since I last fought him, so I expected to have a, tough time. After 2 or 3 tries, I finally beat him, but I can confidently say that at least with regular weapons, I still didn't enjoy fighting him. The main problem with Bale is that he doesn't stop attacking. Okay, that is an exaggeration, but it isn't too far from the truth. He has very little downtime and he keeps spamming combos. When he spaces himself away from you, it's so frustrating just to chase after him, only to get hit by him again as soon as you get close. The challenges don't stop there. Figuring out the best strategy to fight Bale efficiently is tough. At first I thought the best approach was to attack his injured leg, however he has a powerful fire breath attack that's almost impossible to dodge when you're right under him. So I figured you should probably attack him from the front like you would with Midir, but unfortunately that also didn't go well, as Bale doesn't keep his head down for too long and he rarely stays in front of you, making it hard to find openings. When I compare the two fights, I think Midir does a better job of letting the players know how to engage with him. Sure, Midir has a fire breath attack that's hard to avoid when you're underneath him, but fighting him head on isn't as frustrating as fighting Bale. Bale just keeps attacking you over and over and over, and while he does have some downtime, it isn't always enough to land a hit. Now, I don't want to just complain about a fictional dragon, so let's talk about my run with the Dragon Blade Katana. And let's just say, I had a much better experience using this weapon. Sure, I relied heavily on the Ash of War, but it made fighting him much more enjoyable. The Dragon Blade Katana dealt significant damage without making him feel like a complete pushover. It also let me keep my distance and time my attacks better, instead of waiting for him to pause so I could hit his head or risk getting hit by his fire breath when attacking under him. This made me realize that Bale is more fun to fight with a decent range build instead of a regular melee setup. By keeping your distance, you can land hits while still having enough space to react to his moves. You can spam attacks from far away, but you need to be somewhat close to him. This balance makes it riskier, but it also makes it easier to see what he's gonna do next, since you aren't right in his face. I know some people may disagree, but for me it's the most enjoyable way to take on Bale. So yeah, thanks to the Dragon Blade Katana, I actually found myself enjoying the fight against him. Puda Sax was the boss that many people thought I ranked incorrectly. In my previous video I placed Fortox Sax higher than Puda Sax, and a lot of y'all thought I was straight up tripping. After fighting both of them again, my opinions haven't changed, but I will admit that I was a bit too harsh on Puda Sax. After facing him again, I realized that he wasn't that bad at all. In fact, he's far from it. However, I still do believe that his first phase is better than his second due to it having less movement. After my recent fight, I noticed that Puda Sax is actually a decently fun boss with an exciting moveset. His attacks keep you on your toes and there's a nice variety to his moves, which makes the fight interesting. While I still prefer Fortox Sax overall, I can see why some people might enjoy Puda Sax even more. Overall, Puda Sax definitely has its merits and can be a challenging and enjoyable fight. It's always interesting to revisit bosses and see how your opinions change, especially after more experience. So while my ranking remains the same, let's just say I have a new profound, respect for Puda Sax as a fun boss to fight. Fortox Sax. Yes, I do think Fortox Sax is better than Puda Sax in my opinion. You see, while Puda Sax has a cooler design, dope ass arena, and has some overall more visually beautiful moveset, his second phase is what drags him down a bit for me, as he keeps moving around non-stop, barely giving you any chance to hit him. However, Fortox Sax remains the same throughout his entire fight, which can be a downside since it would be cool if he had more moves in his second phase. The only one I can remember is his double lightning sweep, but I think he can do that at any point during the fight. The other thing that holds Fortox Sax back is the tracking lightning attack he spams throughout the whole encounter, which is annoying, but to be fair, it is easy to dodge if you focus. But apart from those things, I really do enjoy fighting Fortox Sax. I mean, his design is amazing, the arena looks cool, especially the skybox and the lightning, and best of all, Fortox Sax doesn't feel like an endurance test, meaning, sure, he can be a bit easy, but he doesn't overstay his welcome, which is always a plus for me. An issue I had with most dragon fights in the series, at least before I made this video, was that I thought of them as spectacle fights, meaning that they were great as first time encounters, but fighting them again on different playthroughs just doesn't hit the same. And while I do still kind of agree that a decent amount of them are spectacle fights, I was a bit too harsh on most. Now, if you asked me what was my opinion on the Divine Dragon during that time, I would have told you that it was one of, if not my favorite dragon fight in the entire series, and obviously, as you can see with this placement, I still do believe that. However, I realized that I contradicted myself back then, because if you think about it, Divine Dragon is literally a spectacle fight, probably even more than Puda Sax and Bale, and it's one of the easier bosses in the entire Soul series. However, there is something that makes it stand out to me more than the other two, and it has to do with the way you fight the dragon. You see, Divine Dragon is a gimmick fight, but a good one, because how you deal damage and attack him is different from the traditional style. You see, instead of going in there and button mashing his toes, you have to use these erupted tree roots with the lightning on it and grapple towards that specific root with the lightning, catch it, and redirect it at the dragon. It's pretty simple and very easy. Now, the dragon does have some moves up its arsenal, like its various sword swings. These are super easy to dodge and deflect, which makes the fight itself a bit easy. A little too easy in my opinion, but the movement during the fight makes it so good, as Sekiro feels smooth as butter to control, the grappling hook is fun to use, redirecting lightning is also a fun mechanic, and deflection is pretty great too. All of those things combined with the cinematic feeling of the encounter makes it one of the best in my opinion. Now, I do have to admit that while I really like the fight a lot, I do wish it was a bit more challenging. Not saying I wanted to one-shot me or anything, but I wish it had some more moves up its arsenal and maybe implement another way of attacking it as well. But the way it is right now is pretty great. But I do want them to take this formula and improve upon it some more with some other bosses in the future. Before we get to the number one spot, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Dragon God. To be honest with you, I literally forgot about this fight, but if I was to place it into the list, it would fall between Ancient Wyvern and Ancient Dragon. It's a really bad gimmick fight that's more of a stealth mission than anything. Jagged Peak Dragon, another forgettable boss. It's basically Agil but with red lightning. I mean, that's literally it. Other Jagged Peak Dragon. Jeez, that I can't say that shit. This fight is pretty cool, as you can watch both dragons beat the shit out of each other, but moveset wise, it's pretty much like the previous Jagged Peak Dragon, which means it's a clone off a clone. So yeah, pretty disappointing. Now, at the number 1 spot, we have Dark Eater Midir. A lot of people hype up Midir as the best dragon boss in the Souls games, and to be honest, they're not wrong. Sure, some might have Bale as their first, but in my opinion, Midir feels more fun to fight. You see, while Bale has a better looking moveset and overall, better visuals, the one thing he lacks in is strategic consistency. I don't know, that's the best way I could put it. You see, when I fight Bale, I'm not sure if I should target his head or go under him, as both seem optimal but has severe drawbacks. However, with Midir, it's obvious that you should target his head. Sure, you can also go under him for attacks, but he will eventually breathe fire under him, and also focusing on his head is way more consistent, as not only do you do more damage, but he has more downtime, allowing you to get 1 or 2 hits in. Because of this, it makes fighting him feel more engaging, as unlike most other dragons where you have to attack their feet, you have to face Midir head on. Some other things I like about his fight is the arena, some of his attacks, and his overall design is, pretty fantastic. Now, there are only 2 drawbacks to Midir's boss fight, and it's because 1, he has a lot of health, and 2, he hits like a truck, meaning 2 of his attacks can wipe out your entire health bar. Shit, one of his special attacks is able to one-shot you. Now, when it comes down to his health, man, it's massive. Pause. And I think it's the weakest part of the fight, as it makes it feel like a slog at times, especially because he only has a few short openings. Now, if you were to ask me to pick which of these things I would rather have, I would go with him having the same amount of damage but with lower health, as that would make the fight a bit more fun. To be fair though, if you keep focusing on his head, when he reaches around 40 or 30% health, he will get temporarily stunned, allowing you to do a critical hit which does a lot of damage. But apart from those things, I do think that Midir is the best dragon boss in the entire Souls series. So that was it for ranking all dragon fights from worst to best. I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember, this is just my opinion. If you disagree with it, then I don't know, get mad, I guess, I don't know. I'm right, you're wrong, get over it. Alright, jokes aside though, if you do disagree with what I say, then that's fine, we're humans at the end of the day. Also, shout out to my Patreon members, thank you guys for the support, and shout out to those who watched till the end of the video. Hope you guys have a good one.